All right. Hello, everyone. We're continuing what we started yesterday. If you remember, we learned in this mimer, put this hat on, in the in Torah Or. And the question is that it says that before the Torah was given, there's a sentence that says that Moses spoke and God answered him in his voice. And it seems to be a little bit unclear because what exactly did Moses say and what did God answer? And not only that, the sentence is written in future tense. Moses will speak and God will answer his voice. Or in Hebrew, that also works present constant. Moses speaks and God answers his voice. So the Rebbe explained to us a little bit about what God is and how God is creating the whole world. And that, let's see where we get up to here. Where do we get up to here? Yes. What? God created. And then there's the names of God. It says the whole idea of the Torah is to fix up the names of God. Fix up the names of God. And the Rebbe explains that's what it says in the Zohar. The Torah is here to fix up the names of God. So what is the names of God? The names of God are the process by which God is creating the world and he reacts to the world. So there's the different names of God, and from the names of God come the different aspects of God, which doesn't at all disturb God's oneness. God is totally one, and there is nothing except for God. So all these names and all these aspects, it's all just like we say, aspects of God's oneness. Okay, this of course is not understandable. We can't understand what we're talking about because there's no such example in the world as creation. One thing creating another thing. Well, one thing for sure, something that creates something else, the creator has to be much more real than the creation is. It has to be more real than the thing that's creating. But really, there's no such thing as true creation in this world because creation means not just forming, taking one thing, let's say energy, and making it into mass, or taking the notes and making it into music, or taking sounds and making it into notes, whatever, vibrations and making it into sounds. But it means taking nothing and making it into something. That's really the idea of creation. Creation means to create something from something that wasn't there before. So maybe you can say that a symphony is a creation because the harmony wasn't there before, but all the notes were all the things that were put together were to create the whole world means that all existence is being created. So in order to do this, not only that the world is also not just being created, but it's very important to God. And so God reacting to the world, that's what's called through his names, that God can articulate his oneness. He can they say, reveal his oneness in all these different ways. Okay. It says, but still, when it comes down to it, the Torah, the world is concealing God. God is not visible in the world. God is not visible in the world to the degree that you might even say that God doesn't even exist. That's what it seems like. So, and the reason because of it is because God is concealing it. He's using all these names and etc. So the names are like clogged up. That's the point. Because of our deeds, our misdeeds, or whatever. So these names of God are like pipes that are clogged up, and the godliness doesn't flow through. Or like a television, and the screen is dirty, whatever. So Abraham was the first person to realize this, that we don't see what really reality is. And the reality is the God creating the world. And he's creating the world so that people do what he wants. So Abraham decided to do what God wants. So Abraham, by means of what does God want? That's the Torah. That's the laws of the Torah. The Torah existed before the world was created. So Abraham did what God wanted, and that opened up the pipes, but only in the upper worlds, so that godliness was revealed in the upper worlds. So it was to prepare preparation for the Torah. Okay. It says, good. The whole idea of the Torah is that it revealed godliness even in this physical lower world. It says, okay, this is where we got up to. God, it says, is the God of realities, the realizations, realities. It's called Il Deot, Hashem. God creates people, and he wants us, he creates us in his image, so we have also our reality, and God is his reality. Of course, the fact is God's reality is the real reality, and our reality is just looking from below to above, and both of them are based on polar opposites. God's reality is based on the truth that God is the only real reality. He's really what he's creating everything. But God creates us in a way that we don't feel that. God creates us in a way in his image that we're looking from the bottom up. So we feel that we're God also. That's what it means we're in God's image. So if we're God, it means that we're the ultimate reality. We're the ultimate reality. That's what God is. God is reality. So we're the ultimate reality. That's what we look. That's called the lower reality. The lower reality is what everybody normal human being feels, right? I exist. What about God? Okay, if you're religious, maybe God's up there, but God is like nothing. God is a nothing, and maybe you can believe in him. But this world is really something. So as the Rebbe, God really wants both. God really wants both. God really wants both. God wants that we, from our point of view, should realize this world is real and that God is really creating the world, and God wants the world to be here, and God wants all the details of the world to be here, and God wants the world to function properly. That each person should have his individuality, and people should be happy, and people should be normal. People should be, they say, positive and active and healthy. That's what God wants. That's ideally what it should be. But God wants there should be a world. He wants there to be a physical world in this, with people in it, with all the details of the world in it, with families, with children, with everything in the world should be here. Right? Everything should be here. But it all should be according to what God wants. And then when that happens, it'll be a healthy world. In other words, a world without depression, without aggression, without lust, without dishonesty, without cheating, without cruelty. Right? That's the ideal world. That's the way this world is supposed to be. Okay. So this is, but how can it be possible that we'll do what God wants in this world? We have to feel God. That's the upper reality. So we have to bring the upper reality into this physical world. The only way to do that is we have to clean up our egotism, our selfishness that covers over, like I said, like the dirty window or the clogged up pipe. We have to do the work here. We have to do this. That's one of the accomplishments, one of the results of learning Torah. If a person learns Torah properly, and he realizes that the words that he says when he learns the Torah, we're talking about Jews. Only a Jew is supposed to learn the Torah, is commanded to learn the Torah. When he learns the Torah properly, so he realizes, he can feel that these words that he's speaking are actually the words of God, and that they clean him up. They clean him up. The words of God are like fire, it says. It's like fire, and they clean the person up. The same thing with the commandments. The commandments wash us, clean us up from the outside, because we don't understand the commandments that surrounds us. And the Torah is the thing, yes, to understand. We have to take it inside. Okay. So both of these, this clean us up. So that's one of the things that says, it says the Torah and the commandments, that therefore the Torah and the commandments, they clean off from inside and out. From inside and out. The inside is cleaned up by the Torah, and the outside is cleaned up by the commandments of our personality, of our soul. And that's what it means that God can be revealed below like above. And that's what it means that Mount Sinai was in smoke, because God around the smoke, it says Ashan is Ulam Shana Nefesh, is world, time, is physical, and Nefesh, spiritual and temporal. That all the three became refined when God came down to the Torah, came down on Mount Sinai in fire. The fire is what purifies us and refines us with the Torah. Now, it's a pretty well-known thing that there's a lot of people that learn the Torah and that they're not nice people. There's people that learn the Torah and they transgress the Torah. All of the enemies, read the book of Psalms, all of the enemies that King David was complaining about, all these were very religious Jews. that they knew the whole Torah and they did commandments and everything. They just hated King David. The same thing was all the Jews went against Moses. Korach stood up. All these Jews, they had received the Torah just very recently, and they all went over against Moses. And so it was the whole Torah is filled with the story of people going against Moses. Excuse me. And before the first temple, and in the first temple, the Jewish people were sinning, and God reproved them, and God destroyed this temple, destroyed that temple. So we see that the Torah is not automatic. People, it doesn't take away our free will, but the Torah does give us an opportunity as a tool that can be used, if used properly, taken properly, to humble a person, to make a person humble and realize that we are just creations, and let God take care of the world the way that God wants to. In other words, there are things that we have to do, but then the results are all up to God. So a person, let's say, goes into business and somebody, he sees somebody else succeeding more than him. He doesn't get jealous because he knows the whole thing it depends on God. You just do what you're supposed to do, and God promises he'll do what he has to do. And sometimes what is a good thing for a person to lose. But a person wants to be a big rock and roll star or a movie star or famous or rich or something, and if he is, it'll only get him into trouble. He'll only get into trouble with all the temptations and all the crazy stuff that goes on. So it's a good thing for him to be a simple person working in his fruit store and making $100 a week instead of whatever how much people make $100 a week, than being a movie star and making $1 million a week, and then everybody knows his face and everything like that. And then he's miserable. He's miserable his whole life, and for this person. Other people, it might be good. So in other words, things we have to be partners with God. He says that's what the Torah does. The Torah gives us an opportunity to be partners with God if we want to. And now we're going to go back to this thing about Moses speaking and God answering his voice. Hine, Koach said, this power to draw down godliness in the world through learning the Torah, Nitan, was given Israel, to the Jewish people. The Jewish people say, that they are. Once I make this bigger. Can I make it bigger? Will it allow me to? Yes. This power was given to the Jewish people. Shehem, that they are a mamshichim, they draw down the Torah and the commandments by means of learning the Torah and doing the commandments in a way of lo techalalu, to not make an empty space, that there should not be anything empty of God's blessing. Masha Enkim, which is not case a non-Jew. If a non-Jew learns the Torah and he does the commandments, ein mamshichim klum, it does not draw godliness down at all. It says that non-Jews can do the commandments, but they can do it not because it's a commandment, because they're not commanded. They can do the commandments like good luck, to bring blessing on themselves, to do a good thing, right? Except for learning Torah and keeping Shabbat. A non-Jew is not allowed to learn Torah and keep Shabbat. But nevertheless, the non-Jew does a commandment, it doesn't make a blessing. Why? Because when a non-Jew does a commandment, it does not connect anything to godliness. This is matna tova. Doesn't draw down anything. It's just, this is a good gift that God gave to the Jewish people. Now, this does not mean that the Jewish people are superior. It just means that they're different. It just means that they're different from everybody else. And therefore, because they're different, so therefore, the result that they have, and when they do a commandment, is different. Like the rabbis say, shlosh matna tova. There are 3 gifts that God gave to the Jewish people, and one of them is the commandment, is the Torah and the commandments. Torah and the commandments. The Torah and the commandments are gifts, free gifts that God gave to the Jewish people for absolutely no reason. He just chose them. Just chose the Jewish people. The whole idea that God chose the Jewish people, he didn't choose the Jewish people for necessarily any reason. He chose because God just chose the Jewish people. He just chose. The same way it says that God chose the world. God is making the world from his own free will. Nothing is forcing him. And God chose the Jewish people because he just chose them. And he called them his son, his chosen son, B'ni B'chorim Yisrael, because God just chose the Jewish people. He decided the Jews are. this has, of course, spiritual implications. And one of them is that when a Jew does a commandment, something happens. Something happens. And when a non-Jew does a commandment, it doesn't happen. Is there any example like this in the world? I don't know. I can't think of one. Maybe I'll think of one somehow or other, but offhand I can't. The Zman Matana, the time when God gave this gift of the Jew to the Jewish people, when he, so to speak, he chose them to be his people and give them the Torah, was on the holiday of Shavuot, the time when God gave the Torah. Gilui, revelation of God's crown. It's called the Keter Torah, God's will. Keter in this, the Sfirot is God's crown. There's Chachma, God's wisdom, God's understanding, but there's a crown which is on top of the crown of God. That's God's will. When God gave the Torah, he revealed his will, why he's creating the world, why he's creating the world constantly. What's so to speak, God's inner will, his inner motivation. This God's inner will. This is above the Torah itself. From this will of God comes the Torah. That's when he chose the Jewish people to give them that. That's why it's possible for a Jew to transgress the whole Torah. And if he says he genuinely requests forgiveness for God, God forgives him. That's called doing tshuva. He says, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. The only reason I did these sins and terrible things is because, I made a mistake. That's all. I just made a mistake. I followed my impulses. I went to this. And I mean, frankly, God, you were the one that gave me these impulses. I'm not trying to make excuses, but I'm guilty, 100% guilty. But you have to have a little bit of mercy on me, because the Jewish people are higher than the Torah. God gave the Torah to the Jewish people. The Jewish people are already there before he gave the Torah to them. Of course, the Jewish people are also creations of God, but this comes from a totally different level. That's why the Jews are called God's sons, because it comes from a totally, that's explained in the Tanya. Zeu, that's what it means. Ilav hayom, if it's not for that day, the kargorim that made the streak change, kama Yosef ika b'shuka. Remember, that's how we started off. The Rabbi Yosef said, true, I'm a genius, and true, I'm a very, how do you say, you're the spiritual person. But if it wasn't for the giving of the Torah, there's a lot of spiritual people in the world. There's a lot of very genius people in the world. If it wasn't for the Torah, I would be like everybody else. What does it mean? There's a lot of different levels of Yosef. Now, the word Yosef means to add on. This word is called Yosef Das, Yosef Machov. If a person increases awareness, then he increases pain. A person that doesn't know anything, so nothing really bothers him, right? You just lost him. A person gets depressed, for instance. God forbid, he gets depressed. Bad news, you just lost $1 million. Whatever. Bad news, your whole family was taken into prison and being in prison. Whatever. There's something's wrong with the guy, right? You want to eat? Whatever. I don't know. As soon as a person becomes more aware of what's going on, he has more values, things become precious to him, then there's pain. Then he feels pain. That's like one of the big principles of these Eastern religions. A lot of the Eastern religions, you don't have any mother, you don't have any father, you have no past, you have no future, you were nothing, you were just being, you were just ultimate being, flowing consciousness, or whatever it is. So nothing affects you, and nothing affects you, and nothing makes you. The big principle in Buddhism, right? Buddhism. There's no the world is painful. Get rid of the pain. Get rid of the world. Don't be connected. Don't be connected to anything. Okay, maybe it's good for those people. I mean, if all the criminals would be like that, that would be great. They wouldn't have any lust in the world. But that's not being human. That's not being human. That's being sort of lobotomized. That's not really true being alive. Being alive means that you you are aware of things, and the world is important to you. Everything in the world is important to you. And the more that you realize the true importance of everything, then the more you stand to be in pain if you lose those things. Yosef Das, Yosef Machov says increasing. So it says there's a lot of types of Yosef. There's a lot of types of increasing of awareness. There's a lot of type of wisdom. There's also strange religions and strange philosophies. Like it says, Chachamim heim l'ra. There are people that are very wise for evil. Right? There's all these universities, communist, but it was called Karl Marx universities, right? Karl Marx was a totally evil, destructive person. His ideas never worked, but they're tremendously wise and tremendously, deep and amazing. You can get into it. Sigmund Freud. There's all books written about how deep it is. The whole thing is wrong. Everything is wrong from the beginning to the end. That what the motivation of man is the Oedipus, whatever it is, totally wrong. All these people, but deep, tremendously wise and insightful, these things they have. It says that they can be bad, they can be wise people to do bad and not to do any good, right? Stalin, Hitler, these people, evil people, murderous people, tremendously wise, tremendously, how do you say, gifted people in leading and speaking, etc. It says like the river that came from Eden in the beginning of creation, there was separation of a high yoma, but that day. So in the world, there's all sorts of success and wisdom and in connection and emotions and wonderful things in the world, but and people, and it's spread out all over mankind. But Rav Yosef said, if it wasn't for the giving of the Torah, I would be like one of those people. On that day, who gilei chachma b'ratzon no yitbarech, the day of the giving of the Torah, that revealed God's wisdom. Hamalubeshes, which Torah, which is put in the Torah. Shabo itlabshut orein sof, that in it is orein sof baruch, and it's revealed below like above. Because that day, this is the day after Shabbat. The Torah was given on Shabbat, after the day of Sfirat, after they counted Sfirat the Omer, right? The Jews got out of Egypt. They counted 49 days. On the 50th day, God gave the Torah. They got 7 weeks were counted, and this is the sign, the 7 names of God we talked about before that you're not allowed to erase. That from these names come all of God's emotions and all the whole world. This is in the order of the creation of the world. That has to be, first of all, little by little. The Jewish people got out of Egypt and they counted every day, 7 weeks. That's why Shavuot, the holiday of Shavuot, is the holiday of weeks. Shavuot is a week. The holiday of weeks, 7 weeks they counted. Little by little, they refined themselves until finally in the holiday, they were ready to receive. On the holiday of Shavuot, there came a revelation from above creation. God saw that they were ready, and he gave them a blast of reality, of truth, which is from above to below. And when this came, the above and below became equal. Ruchnis, spiritual is like the physical. On Mount Sinai, it says God brought all of the heavens down to this world. They stayed heavenly. They didn't stop being heavens. The unification of the heavens and the earth, like it says, God by God, words that God comes down to see in the heavens and the earth. The heavens and the earth are just creations of God. True, they're tremendously important to God, but they're only creations of God. And God wants them very much. He wants the world, especially the physical world. He wants the physical world, every detail, to be imbued with spirituality and with God's essence. God's will. That's the idea of the crown of the Torah, the will of the Torah. Why God chose the Jews, why God gave the Torah, why God is creating the world. That was revealed on Mount Sinai. And therefore, it came revelation to be below, just like above. The same God is creating the heavens like he's creating the earth. The same God is creating the Jews as creating the non-Jews. It just happens to be that the heavens are different and the earth is different. But it doesn't mean that they're not equal. The same thing, the non-Jews and the Jews, right? They're all being created. The non-Jews are different and the Jews are different. But it doesn't mean that they're not equal. In God's eyes, they're all creations. But the Jews, on the other end, the Jews were given, they were, like I say, the public servants. Their job is to make this whole thing work well. They were given the Torah, especially. The Torah, this idea that the Torah was given, it's written, Moshiach NOW. It says that Moses spoke. The word Yedaber means to draw down. We'll see. Moshe is the level of bittul. Moses is the idea of total surrender to the truth. The if Moshe anav ma'od, like Moses was very, very humble. Mikala down from any person that was on the face of the earth. Like it says, Nachnu ma, we are nothing. And Yidaber means Hamshacha, that Moses pulled down godliness into the world. Yadber Amim, like it says, that conducting, leading the people. I know Shemam Sheikh Orin Sof, that Moses drew down the infinite light of God below by means of his total surrender to God. Because Chachma comes from Me'ayin Timotze, becomes ayin, this level of bittul. So, what are we talking about here? It ends up that there's like three things. There's the Jewish people and the world, and there's God and the Torah, and then there's Moses that connects the whole business. The Torah is up by God. That's God's wisdom. The Jewish people, they're here down in the world. They're part of the world. What can connect the two of them together? What connected? What can reveal God in the world? So, well, I mean, in one way, God is already revealed in the world. He's creating the world. There's nothing except for God. He says, yeah, but it's not. It's concealed. The Jewish people didn't do what God wanted. Adam didn't do what God wanted, etc. Nevertheless, it's here. The pipes are closed. The windows are dirty. Right? Who's going to fix the whole thing up? Says Moses. That's the job of Moses. Moses is as unique as God is. Moses is the one that draws down. He's the matchmaker. He draws godliness into the world. Why? Because Moses is totally united with God. Totally united with God. I'm just, one thing comes up in my mind. I can't think for a while I was watching pianists on YouTube, pianists. Anyway, so there's this one pianist, I don't know if you can say the name, doesn't make any difference, famous pianist, great pianist. And there was a great composer, right? The pianist's name was Vladimir Horowitz, and the composer was Rachmaninoff. And it says that this guy, Horowitz, he was a very unique pianist. And this Rachmaninoff said that he plays my music better than I do, and the way that I had in mind that it should be written. So in other words, here we have a person that's an artist, and that artist can draw down art into the world, so to speak, even better than the source of it himself, than the composer himself. He has the ability to convey it to the people. The same thing Moses, he could convey godliness into the world even better than God himself could. God himself, so to speak, can't do it. That's the way God set up the world. He can't do it. He put the world in the hands of man, and Moses is a man. On the other hand, there's no man like Moses that really was totally surrendered to God. There was no human being in the world. It was totally surrendered to the Creator. Didn't think about himself at all, ever. Only was connected. What does God want? What does God need? What does God think? What does God order? What does God forbid? What does God... Just like this musician, he was just totally united with the music. With him, of course, the difference is the music is just one aspect of life, and his whole life was connected to the source of life. But nevertheless, he was the connector. So it says Moses Yedaber. Don't say that Moses just spoke, but Moses revealed. He brought godliness down in the world. Like it says, B'makom shata motzo gudlaso, where you find, where you can say, wow, now I see how great God is, because Moses made God revealed, is there you find moko admosnoso. That's really the humility of God. Namely, because Moses himself was so incredibly humble and held from himself totally not, he realized that every fiber of his being was just a big gift from God. It was being created by God constantly for nothing. It's an amazing gift. So Moses was the most humble person in the world. Because of that, he caused God also to be humble and come down to the world. So Moses was the one who drew down godliness from above to below. Moses is what's called Shushvina de Malka. He's the escort of the king. The Ish Elokim, he was called the man of God. So that before, it says that Moses was called a man of God. The last chapter of the Torah, this is go to bracha, it says this is the blessing that Moses, man, God. It says that the lower part of Moses was a man and the upper part was God. Bala de Matronisa, he is the husband of the queen. The queen is the Jewish people. So on one hand, he is escorting God from above to below, and on the other hand, he's bringing from above and he's bringing it below to the Jewish people. Just think about it. If it wasn't for Moses, the Jews wouldn't have left Egypt. If it wasn't for Moses, the Jews wouldn't have stayed out of Egypt. They wanted to go back all the time. If it wasn't for Moses, the Jewish people wouldn't have received the Torah. They wouldn't have come to the land of Israel. They didn't want to come in. Moses drew down this upper unity of God, that everything in the world would be ayin, was nothing. Everybody realized that everyone in Jewish people realized that this world is an amazing, miraculous creation, that God is creating it all the time from nothing. And everything in the world is a gift, a miracle. The Einod Milvado, but there's really nothing except for God. How do they know this? Because Moses was the one who revealed this in the world. He opened up the pipes. He cleaned off the screen. The Elohim, that's so it says, okay, so it says Moses spoke, Moses drew godliness down. The Elohim yanenu bakal. What does it mean, Elohim? Interesting. This name of God is not the main name of God. The main name of God is Yud Ke Vav Ke, we said before. Yud. So it says Moses brought God down, and Elohim, this aspect of Elohim, this is the world. Elohim is the numerical value of nature, Hateva. All of nature, that's this lower unity, the way we look at the world. That this is what's called God's throne of glory, how God comes down, the source of the animal soul, the face of the lion, it says the face of the ox. This physical world, it answered Moses, which is not the case. Moses was the one, he represents the man that's on the throne. Man is the gematria ma. Moses said, Anachtu ma. So Moses, he was like, Isaiah saw these visions, right? Isaiah and Ezekiel, they saw these visions of a man sitting on a throne, and there's the face of a lion, a face of an eagle, a face of an ox, a face of a man was on the bottom. So it's explained in Kabbalah, Chassidut brings it down, that these faces of the lions and animals, that's the different animals in the world, and also the animal soul of the Jew. Animal soul of the Jew. And the man sitting on the throne, that's God, or the godly soul of the Jew. And that was represented by Moses. Moses was the personification of the Jewish soul in the world. He was the ultimate Jew. Ultimate Jew. A Jew is a person that all he's interested in is God. That's a Jew. All he's interested in is God. That's his only reality is God. And what is God interested in? The world. So a Jew is interested in the world because God is interested in the world. So that's the idea of the lower unity being connected with the upper unity. Who put this whole thing together? Who made this match? Moses. Moshe joined everything together. This is what's called a contraction from us, that we contract ourselves, and that, first of all, God, so to speak, contracts his oneness, that the world seems to exist. That's Elohim. That's Sarara. That's like God becoming a king. He made a world that seems to be separate. That's the name Elohim. So it says Moses drew godliness down from above to below. The Elohim, which is the world, Yaneno, answered him from below to above. This is answer, Aniya. Listen, Aniya. The word Aneno, Hine, Lashon Aniya is Lashon HaKodesh. It's the Hebrew, the holy language. Like Hillel, it says One Acharem, like Hallel, like the Hallel prayer. You answer what everybody says. Right, in Hallel, you say the Hodu Lashem Kitov, the people say Hodu Lashem. That's the answer. Sheshomea Shema Hashomea Omer Masha Omer Medaber. That's called One. When you answer, repeat what somebody says, then that's called answering. So Moses drew godliness down into the world, and the world, the Elohim, that's the world, answered back. The same unity, upper unity that came into the world, the exact same thing, the world answered back. That's the idea of the giving of the Torah. That the lower unity of God, looking at the God from our point of view, will answer to this blessing that Moses drew down into the world. So Moses gave the Jewish people a big blast of the upper unity of God, and the Jewish people repeated exactly what Moses said. that from below to above will be just like from above to below. So Moses, in other words, showed what it means, true unity of God in the world, and why God wants this world to be here, and how it is that every detail of the world in no way disturbs the oneness of God. Exactly the opposite. It expresses the oneness of God. The oneness of God is not just this one bright light that there's no, the oneness of God is expressed in every detail of the world, every rock and every blade of grass and every cat and every star and every angel. That's what it means, Yedaber Yanenu, Lashon Hove. So that's what it means, that Moses is speaking and the world is answering. What do you mean is? Moses died a long time ago. It says, no, espashtusa the Moshe b'kol dor. Every generation has to have a Moses in his generation. Our generation is Lubavitcher Rebbe. He's drawing godliness into the world, and he's making the world answer back to the godliness that's being drawn into it. Bittel, which is found in everyone, kafu ma the shar beliboy. Each and every person realizes that she is being created by God constantly, and that without this creative power of God, the person doesn't exist. But God is creating us constantly. He is creating us constantly, and God wants us to answer back, to reflect his kindness, God's humility, if you want to call him, coming down into the world, to reflect that back. How do we reflect it back? By doing Torah and the commandments, by bittul, by surrendering ourselves to the Creator. So Moses, in other words, he inspires the Jewish people, and from the Jewish people, the whole world, to realize the goodness, the kindness, and the closeness of the Creator of the universe. And through that everyone should do the Torah and the commandments and this all happened when God gave the Torah at Mount Sinai. That's what it means. Moses spoke. Don't say he spoke. He brought down godliness. Yedaber means he brought down the blessing, and the world answered exactly what Moses said. They reflected this upper unity in the lower unity of God, so that everything revealed the oneness of God and why God is creating also this amazing diversity in the world, so that it should all be directed according to the Torah. As we'll talk about more, God willing, tomorrow.